Welcome to Behind the Message. My name is Serene Musselman. I'm sitting here with Carrie Laddiser. Carrie, you just finished week 5 of our current series, Starting Over. We've been talking a lot about regrets and stepping into freedom from those regrets. And so, friends, I want to encourage you, if you've missed these 5 weeks of messages, head over to communitychristian.info. It's been a really powerful series, and you don't want to miss the truth that's been being shared.
Totally.
Today, we're going to dive into a little bit deeper conversation about what you've talked about today, which is moving beyond those regrets into what we called the starting over loop. And one of the things that really stood out to me in what you shared was that it's not a one-time practice. It's actually like a daily rhythm or way of life.
Yes.
And in my experience, anytime I've integrated a new practice, there's always some kind of lasting effect that comes from that.
Sure.
So I'd be curious for you, as you've walked out this daily practice of starting over and living beyond regret, what's the impact of that? Like, where have you seen that shape your understanding of God, of who you are?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about that.
Oh, man. Yeah. This was a big part of even the conversation with the teaching team as we were writing this message was how do we help people wrestle with the idea that it's not just a one-time thing to own your regrets and to start over, but I would love it if it was like, okay, we can just do the work and work on the things in our lives we need to work on and then check and then we're done and then we can live, right?
Yes.
Like having done the work. And I think the decision to do this kind of work is kind of an ongoing commitment. Like it's a choice to live in a particular way as a person who's doing the work and healing things and owning regrets and doing relational work. You know, I think that has been my own experience. And in fact, the more I have done the work, the more I have realized that there's more work to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that's part of what we were trying to get at is that you can actually choose to move from the sorry cycle to the starting over loop, maybe about these huge, enormous regrets that you hold on to, or maybe like in a daily thing when it's a rough morning getting out of the house, right? Like it can apply to both of those. And when you talk about even practices to do that, I'm sure I have talked about this practice before on Behind the Message, but there is a practice called the prayer of examen. It's an ancient practice, right, that I learned about several years ago, and it just became a part of my rhythm in the evenings where I would spend some time reflecting just on a couple of questions like, God, where were you at work today and I missed it? Or where did I miss it in my relationships? Or, where did I bulldoze somebody or run away too quickly or say something I need to take back? Or because I do that quite often.
Yeah, same.
And taking that reflection time to try to identify those places then would give me kind of the work that I needed to do. Where do I need to start over? Where do I need to ask for forgiveness? And actually over time, I think it calibrated me to be more aware of those things when they happened in the moment too, not just have to go back and do repair, but like, wait a minute, I'm really sorry I said it that way. Can I try again? Or so the prayer of examen, whatever kind of regular reflection work that somebody might do, even maybe a part of their like quiet time or Bible reading, I think when we're able to witness and observe ourselves, that gives us space and permission to kind of be honest about the things we wish we would have done differently. And I think that's what's so beautiful about this week's message is that we get to go over and ask for a redo those things, and those regrets don't have to own us.
Yeah. I just want to affirm like how you do create that space. I really appreciate your authenticity in that practice of that.
Thanks.
I see you living that out, and it creates space for other people to be able to do that as well. And it's really powerful. And actually you talk about that a little bit in the message of use this term sacred vulnerability to describe Paul's practice of this.
Yeah.
I thought that was really compelling. Sacred vulnerability, that stuck with me.
Yeah.
And I've seen you model that in what I was just describing of practicing that in your own life and creating space for that.
Sure.
So I actually would like to take a moment just to talk about that.
Sure.
What does that look like to model sacred vulnerability, not just for ourselves, but also to create that space in our homes, in our workplaces, because it's kind of countercultural, honestly, and a little scary to be vulnerable in that kind of space. So would you share more about that?
Yes, I mean, we could talk about this all day. Because it's very scary to be vulnerable. Like the very kind of term invites like this unprotected self, right? And in a world that is full of like curated images and highlight reels.
Yes.
And, you know, it's really scary to show up with kind of all of those parts of us. You know, I could nerd out in like neuroscience and psychology and emotional health and that kind of world. I'm very interested in how that kind of parallels with our theology and what the intersection is. But I mean, it takes a lot of work, one, to be willing to show up in this hard and heavy world with those vulnerable parts of us. Yeah. But I have seen time and time again, whenever I do or somebody else does, that invites their whole self to show up too, right? Like when you have the courage to do that, you're giving other people courage to do it. And when you're able to show up in a space as your real whole self, that's when you can actually experience being really wholly loved. That's how you can experience real whole connection. Yes. And my own kind of journey in this is like, there are parts of me or parts of my story I think all of us learn to kind of lob off parts of us that we think are unlovable, right? And like I think maybe even the first half of our life is learning how to amputate those parts that we think are unlovable or hide them or reorient those patterns. And so I think there's this invitation for us to acknowledge, like, no, those parts are lovable too. And when I can show up as my whole self, it's going to invite other people to do that. But that kind of sacred vulnerability in community requires that we're able to experience some kind of safety in ourselves, right? Safety for the messy parts and the hard parts and the regretful parts and the broken parts. And I think that's what God's love does, is it creates that kind of safety, that we are wholly loved, that when he created us, he called us good, that he put his image in us is like the most remarkable thing I can imagine. Yeah. And so we are good, and when we can operate from that loved place, all those parts can belong. And then we can create that safety for ourselves and hopefully for other people, right? Then we can experience that kind of sacred vulnerability in relationship, which is what he intends for us.
It's so good. Yeah. And being reminded, sometimes we can get stuck in the brokenness. It's good to be reminded that it's actually wholeness that's God's best for us. That's his design for us. Yes. Previously in the series, we even talked about controlling the outcome of this. And I was thinking of that as you were just sharing the parts of us that we lob off. I've done that. Yeah. And it often comes from a place of me deciding the outcome for that part of myself. There's nothing useful or beneficial or beautiful that could come from that.
It's
so
too
I'm going to hide it,
too
set
much.
it away. And I miss God's like purpose and design in that part of my life. I lack the like imagination to see it when I try to control it.
Totally. So. And I think then our wounds, our scars, I mean, we talk about this in the message, but that actually then brings God glory and something beautiful to our own lives when instead of hiding those really broken parts or wounded parts, it's like, oh, this is okay. Everybody I know is struggling with stuff right now or has those parts right now. And to say, no, that this is okay and redemption can come to those parts is maybe the most beautiful story our lives could tell.
Amen. Yeah. Redemption is not just about the parts that I already have the ability to see they can be redeemed. It's for all the parts. Yeah. At the end of the message, you talked a little bit about repair work. And I think we're touching on that a little bit right now. It's the what comes next. Where do we go from here? So could you share with us what you meant by repair work? Is there anything additional you'd want to share or go into in that topic that you didn't have time to in the message?
I think we've got to get really good at repair work if we're going to be people that live in the starting over loop. And I have found, like with friends and people I'm in community with, how their families growing up did repair work really shapes how we as adults tend to do that work. So if your family like did not talk about hard things when they happened and you just brushed it under the rug, or you woke up the next day and pretended like that fight at the dinner table didn't happen, or you didn't hit my car with your bike, or whatever those things are, I mean, that's where we learn to do this kind of repair work. And so if you grew up in a family that didn't do it, most of us don't know how to do it well. And I think this might be the greatest contribution we can make to our relationships, period, is to be willing to go back and say, I'm sorry. To say, I mean, when I get mad at my kids, to not say, well, I yelled at you because you blah, blah, blah. Like, I yelled because I was overwhelmed. And I'm sorry I didn't tend to myself better. You deserve to be spoken to in a soft voice. Or, you know, talk about vulnerability.
Admitting to your kids when you've been wrong.
Or anybody, right?
Or anybody.
Like, to say, I screwed that up and I'm really sorry and will you forgive me? And I have never been met in that work with a no. Right? But it's taken me so long to learn how to do it. And then when you think about any time that you have taken responsibility and that you've done repair work, the relationship is actually stronger on the other side of it. So like the thing that we avoid most is actually like connected to the thing that we want most, which is to be at peace with this person or to be in forgiveness with this person. And so I don't know, the only way out of that is to go through it. And I think the more we practice it, the better we get at it. And the stronger our relationships are with God and with people. So, I mean, clearly I am pretty passionate about repair work, and I'm definitely still learning how to do it. Yeah. But it is like the key to being able to live in the starting over loop and get out of the sorry cycle. And it's vulnerable and it's scary, and it's worth it every single time to do repair work.
Yes. I think we're going to end it right there, because that's the final word. That's all we need. Is it's going to be hard, it's going to be scary, but oh so worth it. It's really good. It's such a privilege to walk through that journey with you and with those of you watching. Thank you for being part of our church family. And I just want to encourage you in what Carrie's been talking about today. These are really crucial relationships between us and God and with others. And so we want to walk with you on that journey of finding your way back to God and growing in these connections. And so I would encourage you, go over to communitychristian.info. We have lots of resources there for you to connect and grow closer in your journey of following Jesus. We'll see you back here next time on Behind the Message.
We were getting ready for one of these and having a good old laugh, and Ted, I look over at Ted and he's going, oh, watch how serious we get. Watch.
10 minutes of...
What's happening?
I'm trying to wipe the smile off my face.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, what is happening to your face right now? He's like, trying to be serious. I was like, I hope I never have to be that serious in my life.